Good evening, everyone. I'm Sari Hanafi, the director of the Center for Arab and Middle Eastern Studies. We are so honored in this center, in addition to the student group for Palestine, to have with us François Burgat. He is Emeritus Research Director at France CNRS, is the French Research Center, National Research Center, based in IREMAN in Aix-en-Provence. But among other institutions, he ran the French Middle Eastern Institute between 2008 and 2013, and the French Center for Archaeology and Social Sciences in Sana'a from 1997 and 2003. So you spent so much time here without mentioning your long journey and stay in Algeria. So you are an expert of Islamic movement, and your last book is entitled Understanding Political Islam. It's been with the Manchester University Press, and by the way, I enjoy so much reviewing this book. Actually, let me justify why I asked François Burgat to talk about the Gaza genocide, where the European left and right converge. It is because in 9 July 2024, last year, I learned that he was arrested, detained, being apologist for terrorism, and the trial is still there. Actually, when I heard the news, I remember my last conversation with Ghassan al-Haj last year about his field work in Lebanon during the civil war in 1978. One of his interviewees from the right-wing militias, Lebanese one, talked about how the Palestinians in Lebanon aim to take over the country and create an alternative homeland for themselves. When Ghassan al-Haj asked him whether he had any evidence about that, he replied angrily, after a glimmering silence, reproaching the questioning and the questioner as a politically heinous. So, I will go to get my revolver from my car. I feel today the level of the discussion about the Israeli war on Gaza is at this level of evidence. In the same vein, when I gave a talk in Oslo last year about the war on Gaza, I had someone from the audience keep repeating how much today anti-Semitism is increasing in Europe. Attributed this to demonstrators who call for a ceasefire in Gaza and a political solution to the Israeli occupation. I was unable to stop him before asking whether it was normal that during the Battle of Algeria in 1950s, or during German genocide in Namibia in 1900, to claim that Algerians were anti-French or Namibian were anti-German, or worse, that Algerians and Namibian were anti-Christian. So this is what I feel the level of discussion today in Europe when it comes to the genocide of Gaza. So can you explain to us how suddenly there is a convergence between the left and the right on this? Please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Sari. Thank you, everybody. As you might know, Sari, I have carefully prepared an introductory joke, which is to remind the audience that you have been my English teacher at the time when I was your swimming teacher. And here is Sari to demonstrate that I succeeded, because he survived twice a short trip in the pool of AUB. At the time, you will soon know that he almost completely failed. Sometimes considering that I'm no longer in my 20s, I start my interventions by the conclusion, just in case I have a stroke, a heart attack or something, so that you don't waste your time. And this was to be the subtitle, we didn't put it, but I suggested. But if I wrap up the main points I'm trying to propose to your criticism, I will put it in this wording. It is not a Jewish state that a large component of the political elite and the French society support blindly with a software inspired of the colonial past or of the hardliners secularists. They support an anti-Muslim state. Israel is supported because it's an anti-Muslim state. And I will say, this will be my conclusion, Islam is not enough to describe the target of the West presently. We have to go beyond. Maybe I can refer to the worst of our Minister of Interior has said a couple of weeks ago. He mentioned in French, la régression ethnique, the ethnical regression of the French former colonized people in the French society. Okay, so I will conclude saying that the problem is more than Islam or religious. It's closely linked to the colonial history of France. Now, it is, of course, a pleasure and an honor for me to address an audience in this part of the world. Usually, it is less comfortable to address an issue related to the part of the words you do not belong to when you are facing an audience who belongs to the... I don't know if you've heard about this quite famous book by someone by the name of Edward Said. You remember, don't you? But today, I don't have such a problem of explaining your society to the audience because I'm going to speak of my society. I'm going to address real radical groups, not you know, really radical groups we have, which I'm entitled to describe since I belong to them. They are the French. I'm not only going to speak about the French. Sari asked me to not to forget that we are European and there is a European context, and I will interfere between France. But I will address a double category of radical activists whom I've already mentioned in my subtitle. Some of them are armed groups and even heavy weapons groups. Some of them are the good old colonialists at a time when the others are newer, and they are the hardliners secularists. So these are the two groups I'm going to describe to you in connection with the situation in Gaza and in the world. You know better than I that the spectacular, the dramatic radicalization of the Israeli government went through two stages. The first one was as soon as the ultra-right-wing settlers entered the government of Netanyahu, they started speaking hate and speaking racism and speaking suprematism and whatever you want. But 7th of October gave them the opportunity to implement this hate speech without limit. Now, I'm not going to try and explain why they are doing so. My point tonight is to try and understand, and maybe so that we can address it, why, although this dramatic change in the Israeli narrative The Western support has not evolved. The Western support is the same, even though there was a dramatic change in everything we were supposed to know about Israel's policy in the... So it ended in what I labeled already a criminal orgy, which more or less 65%, 70% of French voters support, more or less. And ruling elite with tiny exception. The balance of forces now in France on the Palestinian issue, we need to be very careful, but we say LFI, La France Insoumise, 30% of the political landscape would be rational in describing the situation at a time when 65 or 70 just repeat the Israeli narrative. And this is bad news. If you go into the left reservoir of support for Palestine, you must be very careful, because you will find a lot of people who say, I support Palestinians, but not Hamas. And this is the main contradiction of the Western understanding of the situation, is that the leadership of the dominated is illegitimate. I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to speak with a man from South Africa. It was in Gaziantep in Turkey, and so everyone was supporting the representative of South Africa, and I wanted to be mean, and I said, yes, it's great what you have done, except that in your proposal you blame Hamas on the same level that you blame Israel, and the same for Norway, and the same for our good guy in France, Dominique de Villepin, the guy from the right who is open to some kind of understanding. He says we should, at the condition that we eradicate the leadership of Hamas. So even in the pro-Palestinian position in the Western audience, you must be careful, because you will have this type of discourse. We love Palestinians, except if they are Muslims, or too much Muslims. So this is to be taken into consideration. So what I want to do today is go into the social political roots of this drift and see how they are connected to not political development, but political history of the so-called Israelo-Arab conflict, which we ought to label Israeli occupation of Palestine. As I was asked, I will not limit myself to France, but it's an issue where we are quite good, I mean, if you want a good sample of the position of the West, we are not doing too bad. When I address an issue linked to colonialism, I very often say, not only because I had the opportunity to live 7 years in Algeria, and where I made up my tools, that the relation between France and Algeria is an archetype. You cannot find better. The longest period of occupation, the most violent war of occupation, the most violent war of liberation, etc. In this field, and you know that we are going to address the issue of Islamophobia, the relation to Islam, we are quite good. We are on the front line. And of course, there are specificities in Europe at the level of the governments, and you know them, the heroes. They are Irish, they are Spanish, and they are Norwegian. For different reasons. The Irish, because they have experienced colonialism, British colonialism. The Spanish, I like to remind this story. When I was, I happened to spend quite a few years in Damascus, and we had lots of foreign visitors, including the Queen of Spain. And she came with a bunch of high civil servants, and we were traveling in the in front of the, how do you call that, the railway station? What's the name of the railway station?
Hijaz.
Hijaz railway station. And this Spanish guy, politician, he says, oh, that's us. Meaning, he speaks in the name of Al-Umayyin. He considers he is part of the history of this country, and he is completely Spanish. And he says, oh, our architecture. So this is part of the specificity, most probably, I'm not an expert on Spain, but it's most probably part of this more rational understanding that the one of the poor country to which I belong. So the core of my proposals is to explain how this huge consensus, how this majority of blind support for Israel has been built. Now, what you need to say is that it includes extreme right, right in the sense of Gaullist heritage, and wide compartments of the left. Wide compartments of the left, including the almost extreme left. Once again, if you go into, if you hear we love Palestinians at one condition, that there would not be too much Muslim, you have the same problem. Just rhetoric is changing. So I like to remind you that historically, before World War II, the extreme right in Europe was not supporting Israel. And I like this example. You remember Maher Sharif?
Yes.
He's a Palestinian Syrian friend living, and he went in. Did you know he went in jail in Spain? No, you do not know. No. Because until 1986, Franco did not recognize Israel, and he was bringing in Palestinian students, scholarships to Palestinian students. It was impossible that Israel would be supported by an extreme right. Why? Because the bad guy at this time of Europe's history was the Jew. The bad guy was the Jew. And what happened to Maher Sharif? Maher Sharif happened to be a communist. And of course, Franco did not like the Israelis, neither the communists. So he had some trouble as a Palestinian student as being linked to the communists. But just to say that the father, you know, Jean-Marie Le Pen, just passed away, is the father of Marine Le Pen, is the founder of the extreme right. Impossible that Jean-Marie Le Pen, who would go joking about Shoah, would support Israel. So, until post-Second World War, the extreme right is disconnected of Israel. It cannot support. At the time, now you have Marine Le Pen fully, completely supporting. What has happened? It's probably the core of what I am trying to say, and it's banal. But as I said, the bad guy used to be the Jew, and it will become not the Muslim, as I have already said. It will be the decolonized. The bad guy is the decolonized. The bad guy is the representative of societies upon which we had been in a total situation of hegemony, and they have started speaking up, not only from Algiers, but inside our own society. You have it. I mean, this is the core of the problem of France. We had Algerians until early 60s immigration. 62 is the independence, and you have a lot of workers coming. But the first generation of workers, mesquine, they could not even speak one word of French, almost, okay? The second generation, they knew how to speak, but they could not write properly. The third generation, they knew how to write, but they did not know the code of public debate and communication. But here comes the fourth generation. They are brilliant, although they have been discriminated in terms of education. Some of them made it, and they are brilliant, and they are efficient, and they speak loud, and they ask, what do they ask? They ask the rights which are connected to their nationality, and they, worse than that, much worse than that, they ask the right to participate in writing the history of their relation with France. And this is unacceptable. So we had the extreme right moved to one scapegoat, a Jewish scapegoat, to the Muslims used to be Arabs in the racist terminology of France. For quite some time, they were Arabs. The negative description was Arabs. It's early 80s when you have strikes labeled Shia strikes, or I don't know, in Renault, you had a bunch of workers from North Africa who moved into a strike, and they were labeled as Muslim. So, you know, the Arabs became Muslim sometime in the 80s. But if you are an African, if your skin is black, and you are in France, and you are not a Muslim, you will be discriminated almost exactly as a Muslim. Okay, there is a difference, is that the Muslim dimension kinds of enhance the process of rejection, but it is not religious. I very often say, you know, people consider, oh, France is a Christian country. No, France is not. It's no longer a Christian country. France is a de-Christianized country. Only 5% of people go to church. So you cannot stay in the field of, oh, they don't like the prophet or this prophet. No, no. There are other reasons also. In France, some believers, some Muslim believers, some Christian believers have common positions on some social issues, just like gender, homosexuality. They are not that much opposed, okay? So I sometimes, yani Muslim mutadayyinun, they don't like that I say, no, it's not a war of religion. It's not Islam against Christianity, because we are no longer Christian. Because most of us, they don't go to church. Sometimes I use this image in a landscape which Sari knows, because he had swimming lessons in the French Alps a couple of years ago. There is a restaurant next to my place in Savoie, in the Alps, called Les 16 Clochers, 16 churches. Because you can see 16 churches all around the mountain. And I think already 15 years ago, we were there with my mother, and we discovered that only one church out of 16 had a mass on Sunday, and it would go from one to the other. So we are a de-Christianized country. The process of rejection is more social, political, linked to the colonial history than it is to the religion. So we have, first of all, this move by the extreme right, and the extreme right is moving in the good direction for many reasons, but you know, the influence of extreme right is growing in France. So this growing part of the society has kind of minimized the Jewish scapegoat and moved against the decolonized, referring to him as a Muslim, or as he was referred to as an Arab. What happened to the left? Well, what happened to the right, de Gaulle? It's very easy to explain. It's very easy to explain. Whenever I will be in front of the judge, sometimes weeks to come, I have, you know, sometimes at night I prepare my little rhetoric, but the easiest way to disqualify the accusation of apologie du terrorisme is to remind the position of de Gaulle toward the Palestinian conflict in 1967. 1967, de Gaulle says, the Israelis, whom he had described as a people sûr de lui et dominateur, they have conquered overconfidence and dominant, yeah, with a negative dimension. So he said, well, they have conquered all the territories which they wanted to. They are going to occupy them. No occupation can go without repression. And this repression, they will label it terrorism. Plain, factual description of a universal phenomenon, which de Gaulle knows very well, because he has himself been a terrorist in the eyes of the Nazis. You know, and I like, of course, the stupidity of this concept. And then de Gaulle has himself labeled terrorists the nationalist Algerians. And this is away from the issue today, but then some Algerians, some militaries have labeled terrorists their own opponents. So the right now is in a situation, the right, not the extreme right, Dupont-Moretti, Minister of Justice, to say, if you, well, this is my crime. I tell you my crime. I mentioned Hamas in a non-negative context. And you might know I like to be a little provocative. So responding to an attack, I said, by the way, I want you to know that I have much more respect for the leadership of Hamas than I have for the leadership of Israel. By the way, this means I have respect for the leadership of Israel. It's just that I have more for the leadership of Hamas. This is a crime. This is enough. This is a crime. So Dupont-Moretti, the Minister of Justice, asked to les procureurs, to the attorneys, no, who are their accusation? Prosecutors, to prosecute whoever would refer to the actions of Hamas in the frame of understanding of a resistance. He said it word by word. I can quote it here. You know? So the right of de Gaulle, whom I mentioned, the plain description of the Israeli-Arab conflict, moved to the France of Macron, and I will tell you, it's been further, but to this France, which criminalize the fact that you equate resistance and the action of Hamas after 70 years of martyrs. Yeah, when I mentioned the European environment, I would have liked to mention the opposite of Spain. It would be Austria and of course Germany, but for specific reasons. Germany, you know, the historical trauma, but this is where the worst is happening, sometimes even worse than France. So this blind identification to the Israeli narrative is not that we support this narrative, but it is that we criminalize the Palestinian narrative. And this is new. It has never been like this. I mean, well, in 2006, when I want to be very nasty with Libération, newspaper Libération, of course, the chief redactor is a former Mossad officer nowadays. But in 2006, the first war, one of the wars against Gaza, there had been marches in Paris supporting it. And Libération, full front page, had labeled in France a new anti-Semitism. You know, marching, supporting the people who were being slaughtered in Gaza was anti-Semitism. So it is not new, but the fact that we criminalize, of course, not only, we have never heard the voice of a Hamas representative on French media. Never. You cannot imagine. If you, to give you other examples, and I'm glad to mention the name of Christophe Oberlin, who is a surgeon who worked extensively in Gaza, and he knows, not as a political scientist, as a human being, he knows all the people of Hamas. So he wrote a biography of Ahmed Yassin, interviewing all his, translating the extensive interview with Ahmed Mansour on Al Jazeera, several hours, and interviewing many of his friends in Gaza. And I just published the cover of the book on Facebook. Boom! It disappeared immediately, and my account was limited. And the same occurred when I'm really proud, and I was mentioning this morning a little further south in this city. In 1992, I visited the new Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan. So when he died, when he was killed by the NGO Assassins Sans Frontières, the Israeli-American NGO, governmental organization, I published a few lines, hey, oh, this person, it happens that I met him, and he is the one who helped me understand how Hezbollah would relate to the history of resistance, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah. Boom! Suppressed. Apologie du terrorisme. And account limited. So you see the atmosphere. We not only do we blindly support the Israeli narrative, but we criminalize the Palestinian narrative. And so Dupont-Moretti, word by word, he says, messages incitant à porter un jugement favorable sur le Hamas. Whatever word incites to have a positive understanding of a Hamas is criminalized by law, not by law. In fact, this circular has no legal meaning, but it has been obeyed by the prosecutors. Part of my crime is that I published. There has been on the network an inquiry by someone I do not fully respect for some other reasons. But you might know Max Blumenthal. Max Blumenthal, Gray Zone, okay? Gray Zone, it's difficult for me because his understanding of Syria is totally opposed to mine. But they made an incredible inquiry on the circumstances upon which the Israelis 2 months after October, realizing that they were losing weight in the Congress and in public opinion, decided an offensive in the media, and they said, "What should we say?" They made an inquiry. What is the worst? Is it to kill someone? No, there's worse than that. Rape. Oh, rape! And 2 months after October, all of a sudden, you have New York Times writing that there has been sexual offensive all over the place, blah, blah, blah, blah. And there is a tiny communique of Hamas. They say, sorry, there has been no such things during 7th of October. And I had, this document was linked to my first response, having respect to the, and now we know from Israeli side that this was absolutely true. The Palestinian voice was expressing reality. By the time the Israeli narrative got complete, full lie, okay? It's criminalized. If you say, I have reason, Israelis have reasons to think that all these accusations are not founded, you are a criminal. So what happened to the left? And this is also a core of my talk because it is this problem is not only in Europe. Sometimes it is also yours. I mean, it happens in the Arab world that this criminalization of Islamists functions with the same mechanism. What happened to the Palestinians? You know more than me this part of history. They elected Hamas in 2006. And it was a serious election. Why? Because EU, we monitored the elections. We know it was a good election, okay? They elected Hamas, and then I remember we was with Alain Gresh at that time, and we spoke to the activists, not in Gaza, but in the West Bank. And we wrote an article, 3 of us, under the title La Triple Agression, the triple aggression? Triple aggression. What happened to Hamas? It was taken into between the treason of the Europeans who refused. I mean, Israel started kidnapping the deputies, huh? And jailing the deputies and the ministers, okay? So Europe supported, Israel supported, and of course, and this is where I want to come, the authorities supported. Three sides went against Hamas. Anyway, Hamas, the Palestine, became identified in the mind of Westerners in general, French in particular, to Islamist. Islamist. So then you had this mechanism, which is very convenient. We, as secularists, it is impossible for us. We like Palestinians, you know, but it's difficult to support Islamists. So the break in the relation between the left and the Palestinian cause will be worded this way, starting 2006. Oh, they are Islamist. And of course, this is not only this break, this emotional refusal of the Islamic, political Islam generation is not only European. It is also Arab to a great extent. It is functioning very clearly. There is a strict cooperation now between, let's say, the Emirates or Egypt and my country. And whenever they come and visit us, they say, we are going to help you struggle against not terrorism, not fundamentalism, not extremism, political Islam. These are the words of Sheikh Issa, the Saudi, when he came in September 2019 to France. These are the words, of course, of Sisi when he came several times to France, because we gave him the La Grande Croix de la Légion d'Honneur. Right? No, this is part of the landscape. Okay, the left is instrumentalizing secularism to deny the legitimacy of the Palestinian resistance. Why do I say it's hypocrisy, it's not true? It's very easy to demonstrate. Because if they were with secularism, then they should condemn the Israeli narrative, which is not, which was not, and which is absolutely not. It has become explicit that God has something to do with the issue of land. God gave them the land, and they are the people of the Enlightenment. We are, all of us, we all people des ténèbres. So you have never heard any leftist, well, when I say the leftist Socialist Party, of course the Socialist Party was not a strong supporter of the Palestinians, but there was a varnish of support. This ended in 2006. And until now in the Communist Party, for instance, you know, the worst of what happens to the left, you can see if you, maybe you know the symbol of our secularist left, le canard enchaîné, a newspaper. The narrative of le canard enchaîné, pure secularist left in France nowadays is the same as the extreme right. It identifies to the lexic of the extreme right, criminalizing Islamism or primary religious belonging in politics. You know, I'm close to finish. Don't worry. I wanted a positive conclusion. Very often I try and I very often address audiences in the Middle East or in the Muslim world or French Muslims, and I want to say something positive for the end. So people say, is it going to be worse tomorrow or only after tomorrow? And I say, listen, if I had to invest money or family in the most material meaning of the word, I would rather invest in Palestine than in Israel. Meaning what? The battle will be long, but it is going in the good direction. This does not mean that the suffering, the violence will not increase on the side of the Palestinians, but we can reasonably consider that the future, and then I extend my word, of the societies in this part of the world is brighter than the future of our societies in Europe. Because I consider that very slowly, in Libya as well as in Syria, history is moving in the direction to which it will produce political institutions capable of functioning in the meaning that allowing differences to coexist at a time when we are experiencing the opposite direction, the exact opposite direction. Should I mention United States? We are all in a Trumpization at a time when you are moving away from the excesses of your own history. You're moving away from colonialism. You're moving away from Saddam Husseinism and from Bashar al-Assadism toward, okay. But to build my optimistic conclusion, I need to be mean to you. I need to say something unpleasant. Probably you know this. It's not a joke. It's very serious. Probably you've heard it. I'm not the one who wrote it. I found it on the social network, but I think it's brilliant. It's 3 world leaders. They want to make a competition. Who is the meanest of us 3? So of course there is an American, and there is an Israeli, there is an American, and there is, you name it. I hate to say an Arab or a Muslim, but you may say an Egyptian or a Jordanian or a Moroccan, and they start the competition. So the Israeli is the strong initiative. He takes a big stick of metal, long, and when a lady comes by, boom, he hits her and she falls on the ground. So he says, ha ha ha, can you do better? And the Americans say, yes, I have done better. I have done better. Because I am the owner of the stick. I am the one who paid for the steel. And my hands are clean, no blood. And then comes the last one. I say, if you want him to be Egyptian, he says, no, forget it. I'm worse than you two, than both of you. I said, no, impossible. And he says, yes, because you know, this lady, she happens to be my mother. That's my way of being mean تجاه القيادة العربية في المنطقة. Okay? Why this mean story will allow me an optimistic conclusion? Because the counter-performance, before all, the brilliant performances of some Jewish students in the US and in France who oppose their society. By the way, I remember a very personal anecdote. In 2007 or something, I wanted to write to support Hamas. I'm not to support Hamas. I hate this expression. To allow Hamas to be perceived rationally by the French. But I said, you know, my voice is, I am boycotted in the mainstream media. I need to have someone to speak with me. And someone said, yeah, you should have a Jewish person write with you so that you widen. And another person told me, it has to be a lady. Okay, so I started looking for a Jewish lady to co-write the tribune in Libération. And I found this lady, Esther Benbassa. She is presently a senator or something like this. And she accepted my text and she published it, and it was published. And by the time I was in Palestine, and I was waiting, I had been invited by the Islamic University of Gaza, but of course the Israelis, they did not let me in. So I spent 4 or 5 hours at Erez, and I was waiting, and I had my telephone on, and Esther Ben Bassa called, and she said, François, the paper has been printed in Libération. They want to kill me, they want to kill me. All my own community, they want to kill me. So you have Jews in the US, you have Jews in France, you have the most beautiful people in France, they are those who study political science. À l'IOP de Paris, Method, okay? They struggle, they exist, they have a strong voice, they have a strong position. Now, put in the landscape the total counter-performance of القيادة العربية في المنطقة. هم يتنافسون to help Israel. A new road, okay? I remember, you know, I live closer to you than you to Morocco. You know, the King of Morocco made a crazy declaration. He said, you know, we were to buy tanks, armed vehicles from Israel. We do not have it, but it is not because we do no longer want to buy them. It is because the Israelis, they need them now presently for us. So you have this narrative. You have this narrative in the Arab world, the worst of what you can imagine from Egypt. And why does this allow me to be positive in my conclusion? It means that this demonstrates that essentialism, you know, the bad Jews, the good Jews, the bad Christians, the bad Westerners, the good Muslims, it does not function. The break in our world is not between deen wa deen, thaqafa wa thaqafa. No, it is between the dominants and the nominees. And there is a strict cooperation between the dominants, which has produced this Islamophobic discourse which the poor people in our society function with. So this, I think, allows me to be positive in my conclusion, meaning that there is still a lot that we can do, all of us, whatever our primary belonging, and the road will be long, but there will be victory sometime. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention.
Thank you so much, François Burgat. I think you work in the long of your intervention, the connection between being pro-Palestinian and being Islamophobic, if you like. And I think this is a very interesting, if you like, connection, while in the end, you connected to domination, and maybe we need a little bit a kind of a Marxist analysis of class issue, and so Islamophobia is not only cultural phenomenon, but also, if you like, domination and exploitation economically, and etc. So. I would like to open the floor, including for those who are with us online, so you can raise your hand and we will give you the floor. So who would like to comment, challenge? Okay. Yeah, please. No, you need to talk to microphone because we have people online with us. Okay, can maybe you move a little bit? Yeah, thank you. You take notes, maybe? Yeah, so. Can you present yourself also, please? Yeah.
Yeah, okay, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Regarding France in particular, so the French Maquis, when France was under Nazi occupation, so they were terrorists, right?
Of course.
If we use today's
I said it. I said de Gaulle was considered a terrorist.
Yeah. Another thing in France is the, I think, electoral system as it is in all the West, where all the media in France, it's now owned by Jewish Zionists, almost all of them. Canard Enchaîné, you know, all these newspapers, the TV stations, everybody. So when they control the media, they are controlling the minds, and at the same time, the Catholic Church, which used to be very powerful in France, now as if it doesn't exist anymore. As you said, there are 5% only who go to church. And even Macron, I mean, he comes from the Rothschild, you know. So the system is done in such a way. Big capitalism, which happens to be Jewish, is controlling the minds and the media and everything you hear on TV or you're forbidden to hear from those people who, by magic, they control almost all the West. Am I wrong or am I exaggerating?
You are partially wrong, because the media, and there is a very brilliant tahqiq inquiry in Le Monde Diplomatique about a year ago. You have the exact frame of who owns the media in France. The media, and this does not contradict what you have said, of course, but the media are either in Franco-Israeli hands, like Drahi and a lot, or extreme right. But the new situation is that the extreme right has joined the narrative of the Jewish community, of the radical Jewish community, business community in Europe and in France. And there used to be a counterpower with the, there is an exception in this extreme right and Franco-Israeli Rijel Amal. It was the Christian press, Le Pèlerin and this group, but they have lost a lot of their influence. Therefore, yes, part of the situation in France is that there is a complete, full domination. And I like to make an easy point. The counter, the good press, the non-Zionist press, most of the time is directed by Jewish journalists. When you go from Edwy Plenel to Alain Grèche to Seifert, so once again, it means it's not all Jews, absolutely not. The most courageous one are the businessmen who hold you know, the counter-narrative in France is Politis, but it's weekly, Mediapart, of course, Le Monde Diplomatique, and this is it, basically. And they had Jewish personnel in their offices. But yes, what you say is definitely the dark side. Well, the side of the situation which we could influence, because if Mediapart was becoming stronger, if a canal had been attributed to Mediapart, instead of giving it, you know, there's been a reform. They have closed one extreme right channel, C8, but they have given a channel to the most radical Islamophobes, Caroline Fourès, I don't know who is familiar with her name. The worst has happened again. Instead of making it easy, with your permission, I have one point I forgot I wanted to make. It's in matter of analysis, because the name of Florence Bergeau-Blaclair came to my mind. We must say that this drift toward the extreme right has been supported by at least 3 academic voices. No more, but 3 academic voices. The main one, the big one, the old one, you know him, is our friend Gilles Kepel. You said it. The other one is the good friend of Gilles, is Bernard Rougier.
Who did his PhD on Ain al-Hilwi. I mean,
which was a good PhD, by the way, which was not the worst. And then the third, I would say the worst, because it's by a lady who cannot pronounce one single word of Arabic, who has been writing about what she fears, what she ignores, but not what she has studied. And I wanted to mention this name. Why? To say that what has happened in France during the last 10 years is that the size of the targets of the Muslim citizens who could be legally discriminated and criminalized has been increasing. This increasement has been supported by an academic discourse. And you have this famous, ugly concept of jihad d'atmosphère. Atmosphere of jihad. You know, atmosphere, it has no border. You know, if I am the jihadist, you can be the jihadist because you are in my atmosphere. If you go to the mosque twice a week, if you eat, you know, those sandwiches, what are they?
Falafel?
No, not falafel.
Shawarma?
Shawarma. You eat shawarma 3 times a week. You are, and you buy a book in an Islamic bookstore. You are in the atmosphere of jihadism. But then we have moved the preface of the book of this lady. I mentioned the name once, and I will not twice. It is le frérisme d'atmosphère. Okay? So what this unique point I wanted to make goes with this sentence. The French state used to repress and criminalize the actions of a small minority of Muslims. And this was more or less legitimate. I mean, I did not mention the fact that the terrorism made it possible. What happened to France in Bataclan, this is what made it possible to blow up all barriers, all limit in this extension of the criminalizing target. But this lady was interrogated about a year ago on, she wrote a book on Le Frériste network, the network of the Frérists. They want to take control of Western society.
The network of the
and it's so
Muslim
funny because
Brotherhood.
it happened at a time when the demonstration was so explicit that those who control European societies, they are not precisely Muslims. I mean, their ability to influence the policy of Europe is nothing in comparison with guys of another religion, which I do not mention. But she was asked, is it possible to be a Muslim and not be a frériste? I mean, a bad guy? And she says, and I have it on video, she says, I have known a period of time where it could be possible that you would be a Muslim and not a frériste. Now, I don't know if this is any more possible.
Yeah.
So the target...
maybe we have two historians at least with us, Salim Demirgel and Mathieu. And I would like is this today an exceptional time? I mean, or really it was something we can see it a long durée. I mean, Salim, coming from Turkey, I mean, what? Yeah, so.
Well, I was going to ask our guest, actually, what he thinks about the Erdogan position on Hamas, because I know we're talking mostly about the Arab countries, but there has also been a Turkish aspect to this. But I will address Sari's question first. This, of course, every time, every period is unique, right? I mean, but this, the fact, and I join our speaker in the fact that Islam is so much on the agenda today is because it is more present in the world today than it has ever been. And of course, when Sari says the long view. It's very interesting. In the 19th century, in the very beginning of there was these guys called the Young Turks. Some of those Young Turks were actually militant atheists. and it was scientific atheism, you know, in the European sense. So this is something that we tend to forget. Is that the secularism, as we understand it in France or elsewhere, is not something that we have in Turkey. In Turkey, what we have is the nationalization of religion. We have something called the Diyanet İşleri, which is the Directorate of Religious Affairs, which is actually even more than a ministry of religion. Because this Directorate of Religious Affairs, of course, is very closely linked to the present-day regime. It can't be otherwise, but it is above regimes. When this was created in 1924, when the Khilafat movement was removed, it started out as the Waqf ministry, and then it gradually became what it is today. So what we have in the to address your issue of the longue durée is one way of being, this is going to sound a bit strange, but one way of being anti-Islamist is to nationalize Islam. And that's what the Turkish state has done. Okay? Thank you.
If you're considering the categories, Europe has always take the other people through certain categories such as tribes for the Africans or sectarian groups for these regions, and that go back to the 19th century. What maybe it's quite unique, those in this period of time, is that what we thought which was part of the past, which was the great development of settler colonialism, is going back forwards. And Trump is leading us, Netanyahu is leading us toward a new discourse, which makes sense for a lot of groups in our society. What we thought which was part of the Europeans or Western history from, let's say, since the 60s, is not anymore part of the history. It's the forefront of the discourse. And just to go back on the remark you said about how to make people think, what we are witnessing those days is a very strong attack from the right, extreme right movement connected to the business communities. Mostly, I mean, there is one name in France, if you want to follow it, named Bolloré. But it's articulate, and the agenda is very well organized by developing TV stations. And if you're looking at its TV station, for example, CNews was the first to follow up the agenda of Tzahal during all the different events from the 7th October, not the other ones, and the other one follow up. But it has also an agenda by taking control of the books, and you can discover a few books disappeared from the libraries in France or bookshops. And that's quite global. And at the same time, if you are looking, there is one publisher, Fayard, which is quite famous in France. He has before Ilan Pape, the ethnic cleansing in Palestine. That was off the shelves. And suddenly the two books on the shelves is from Philippe de Villiers, Memoricide, to talk about the French as if the French will disappear as groups. And it's very, very strong and hard. Why it's happened now, potentially is maybe because the political realm has crumbled since about the last 10 years. Political parties doesn't exist. The forum in which the society can discuss about it doesn't exist. As François mentioned, there is questions, very hard questions in the regions, and some paths started to be drawn towards solutions. In Europe, it's exactly the opposite. We cannot face the questions for the moment. And that's quite unique. And I think we need to go back on the 19th century to understand why at certain times Western started to turn into the opinion that they might dominate everybody without any concern, because we haven't yet the answer.
Thank you, Matthew. Bashar Haidar?
I want to ask maybe a continuation of our discussion yesterday about the left and the right in France and in Europe. I mean, the explanation you're giving is that the left and the right are sort of way Islamophobic of some sort. That explains why they are pro the. Now, of course, I have two questions. First of all, the phenomena of the left and the right agreeing in Europe, the extreme left, especially the extreme right, is not only about issues involving Muslims. They agree on Russia, for example, in Germany. The extreme left and the extreme right in Russia are pro-Putin in Ukraine, the Ukraine issue. So there is something there. Now, on the French side, of course, Mélenchon is considered left, for sure. He is pro-Palestine. He's anti-Assad, pro-Assad. Of course, you can explain that he's pro-Assad because he's afraid of the Islamists there, but he's not afraid of the Islamists in Palestine. There must be an explanation for this variation, for the fact that the extreme right, extreme left in Germany agree on things that have to do with Muslims or decolonizing people. It's all. And there's also, it must be explanation why the socialist left are anti-Assad, were anti-Assad and pro-Israel narrative. And that cannot be explained by their anti-Islamist one, because the anti-Assad forces in Syria are Islamist to a great extent. So that explanation of the congruence between the left and the right, based on their Islamophobia, seems to need some explanation more, unless I got wrong the terrain of the left and right in France.
Yeah, please, you have the floor, François.
Well, I make first the most recent question, and I like it very much. In fact, what's wrong in your proposal is that the position of the left toward Assad, the position of France toward Rabi' al-Arabi has to be constructed. When it started in Tunis, we say, we are going to help you. Who? The revolutionaries? No. Ben Ali. We're going to help you hit with more accuracy by choosing more efficient weapons. When it started in Egypt, we said the same. We are going to support Mubarak, okay? Then we realized that we had made a huge mistake. And we moved into a completely, totally different position, which ended, and this picture is very important, Bernard-Henri Lévy hand in hand with the Libyan revolutionaries. So we ended not only supporting the revolutionaries, not only the Islamist revolutionaries, but we kind of preceded them because we participate in the assassination of Gaddafi directly with the planes and possibly even a little bit more. Okay, why did we do this and why did we change? Because the position of France changed completely. Our opening toward the Islamist movement, and I like to remind that I was sitting next to the minister, no, he was in front of me, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Alain Juppé, at the Institut du Monde Arabe in April 2011, when he had just said in this wide auditorium of the Institut du Monde Arabe, in French, we have asked, nous avons demandé à nos diplomates d'engager, well, we have asked our diplomat to engage any political force, including the Islamic, so they had the long discussion whether they would say Islamist or Islamic. They decided that Islamic was less radical, so including the Islamic, okay? So France moved toward the revolutionaries, but it changed completely again, 180 degrees, and it ended supporting Haftar in Libya. It ended supporting the Emirates. It ended supporting the counter-revolution. Clearly, why? For one reason. When it became clear, when they opened the ballot boxes, and they saw that inside the Arab Spring ballot boxes, there were Islamist voices. The results of the elections in Tunis, the results of the elections in Egypt made the French completely change their understanding, except that they did not say it. They didn't say it loud and clear, but they stopped supporting the revolutionaries in Syria, for instance. It was a lip service. And they, of course, then they focused upon the so-called radical opposition, and they focused upon Daesh, and they forgot completely the mainstream of the revolutionaries. So I think this is to be very important. Now when it comes to Mélenchon, I had dinner with Mélenchon with the French, if this is recorded, yeah, with the French ambassador in Tunis. Mélenchon is far out when it comes to understanding he is from Morocco. He was born in Morocco. But I remember this anecdote. He said, you know, Tunisians, they like Robespierre. Yes, yes, I had a haircut this afternoon, and the man, he loved Robespierre. So it is important that the Tunisians, they like Robespierre. I mean, you see the scientific level of this appreciation of the Arab political landscape. They like Robespierre. And the guts of Mélenchon are Islamophobes. His guts are Islamophobic. But his treatment is a matter of balance of forces in his group. Sometimes he make a noble statement, and he participated in the march against Islamophobia. This was very courageous. He was criminalized. And sometimes he said really stupid things, demonstrating that he has not the feeling of this part of the world. So it is not so contradictory. I would say secularism, hardline secularism, I mean mistreatment of the concept of secularism plays the role. As I said, we have two armed groups, the old colonialists, I mean the right imaginaire of the other, and the left. And the left, il fait un détour. There is it's more sophisticated. We like Islam, you know, we have no problem with Islam. We have a problem with the presence of deen in the public sphere. That's all we have a problem with. By the way, we have no problem with the Judaic religion in the public sphere. So you see the limit of this position.
Erdogan, the question about...
By the way, this director of religious affairs, I think I met with him twice. And he if I'm not mistaken, he's the guy, because he liked to repeat this, during the coup against Erdogan in 2016, he is the one who, he said SMS. He sent an SMS to all the guys who go up Muezzin.
Yeah, the preachers.
No, the Muezzin. The Muezzin is
the call for praise.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's the one who started the counter attack of the society through the Muezzin. He said, you know, and he had this one, he said, you know, I did boom, woo, several thousand Muezzin went up and started calling the society to resist to the coup. Yeah, I mean, we need more time to go in the... Iran had the same history of Turkey. Iran would rip off the birds of the religious people, rip off their hat. You know, there is a beautiful book about Turkey. It's The Fez of the Heart. I don't know if you've seen this. It's the history of the fez, the hat, the tarbouche, as a symbol of modernization, which has been both imposed to the traditional turban and rejected by Turkish secularism and criminalized, because if you go on top of Bosphorus, you have cemeteries, and you have the tombs, and very often the people, upon their name, they would have a tarbouche, a symbol of and they came, boom, boom, boom, boom, boom, boom, boom. They destroyed. So this is not only Turkey, this is also Iran. You have this very radical movement of secularization where birds were criminalized, where, of course, hijab was criminalized, and you know the Turks, they had to wear incredible hats because they were no longer allowed to wear their homemade culture. Am I wrong?
Yes, I'm afraid you
Yes.
are. Because the breaking of the headstones, that goes way back to Mahmud II.
Yeah, of course.
We're talking the beginning of the 19th century, not Kemal's period.
Oh, no. He imposed the turban, and then he wanted to get rid of the turban and imposed the fez. But the fez was criminalized by the Young Turks. That's what I mean.
That is correct, but just I'm a historian. Historians tend to be boring and pedantic. The breaking of the stone,
Mahmoud
the
did
headstones,
too.
those were Janissary headstones.
Okay.
And they were not turbans, they were turbans, not fezzes. Okay? So, and the other thing is, I just wanted to ask you, what do you think about Erdogan's policies of instrumentalizing Hamas?
Well, it's difficult for me to adopt this terminology. For instrumentalizing Hamas, I mean, I know that there is no... what happened in Turkey, Turkey did not do a perfect Arab Spring history, because Turkey went to focus upon the Kurdish issue. At the time when the Westerners, we came to focus on the Daesh issue. And the mainstream of the revolution was left alone to a certain extent. But I don't get the message of Erdogan instrumentalizing Hamas. Do you mean that Hamas is illegitimate in the Palestinian society? Or what exactly do you mean?
I mean, he's very well publicized, sort of protecting Hamas. I have no issue with that. I mean, I think it's one of the few good things he did. But why do you think he did this? I mean, why do you think, and because since you're an expert on Hamas, why do you think Hamas and Erdogan came to have such close relations?
There is absolutely no contradiction in the fact that they have a good level of communication. I say, why wouldn't it be like this? I hate to speak in terms of ideology, but Hamas is not Daesh. Far. Israel is Daesh. I like to say it, and it's not to be provocative, because a sectarian supremacist discourse is that of Daesh, which they implemented with the Yazidis in Iraq. This is the bad guy. Al-Qaeda did not do this. Al-Qaeda did not do this. But Hamas is not a sectarian movement, and I see no reason why there shouldn't be a good level of communication between Erdogan, who is more or less some political Islam which have succeeded, and Hamas, which moves more or less in the same category of political landscape. I don't know if you agree.
Yes, but yeah, we still have a few minutes, and I would like to ask the last question on behalf of the student group for Palestine, with whom we co-organize this panel, and they ask about George Abdallah. So what happened? I mean, how would you explain this? I mean, this vindictive, this absence of justice. I mean, a guy who finished his time of
American-Israeli means of pressure on the French government from the very beginning, because George Abdallah is supposed to have hurt a Mossad agent, and this is it. And then the backbone of the judiciary system is flexible to the extent, but I don't know who knows the last judiciary issue, no? Because it's these days, it's sometimes in this month of February, but I have not read about it. But there has been, for the first time in, how many years? 40 years? He is the eldest political prisoner, of course, in France and in a lot of countries. There has been, for the first time, a positive position of the judiciary, but the ministry has made appeal, and we are expecting the appeal anytime. And in the present atmosphere, this ability of Israel imposing every single detail, you know what the French have done. We have expressed the inaccountability of Netanyahu facing the judgments of the ICC. I mean, there is absolutely no limit. So, of course, Georges Ibrahim Abdallah is the perfect symbol of this ability of the Pax Israelo-American. I mean, I made a new punchline about half an hour ago. No, 2 hours ago, but I did not publish it yet. But because I was in the Dahiya this morning, and I wanted to show a picture of the intervention of this, not NGO, GO, governmental organization, Israeli-American organization labeled Assassins Sans Frontières, Assassins Without Borders. Assassins Without Borders, they are capable of influencing the president of the French Republic to the extent that he will influence the judiciary to maintain this incredible scandal of the situation of Georges Ibrahim Abdallah. Asaf, this is what we are.
If there is no other questions, I would like to thank you all for your participation. Thank you so much, François Burgat, for you and hopefully we see you in the next event about games. This time it will be organized with games and critical development program at my department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Media Study. It's a movie in the 26th February, a Syrian movie of Osama Muhammad. You will receive the invitation soon. Thank you so much.